Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar. My name is Rachel Ashton, and I'm a marketing manager here at Ionic. Before getting started on the demo, I wanted to remind you that you can submit questions to us during the live event using the questions pane in your control panel, and we'll answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. In addition, this presentation will be available for on-demand viewing, and we'll send you an email with the presentation link following the live event. So now I'd like to hand it over to Nick Hyatt, our Appflow product manager, who will be presenting tackling continuous delivery with Appflow.
Hello. Like Rachel said, I'm Nick Hyatt. I'm the product manager for Ionic Appflow, our CICD focused product around helping you create your Ionic apps. My Twitter handle and my email there are on the card of the screen. If you feel so inclined, reach out to me. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. So I want to go over the agenda first before we start anything. So today I think we're going to talk a little bit about first why CI/CD is important, what it means for businesses, how it can impact your business, then how Appflow can help, and then we're going to go through a real-time demo of just how you might set that up to kind of implement your CI/CD best practices for your organization. So I like to start with a little fact that is kind of mind-boggling to me, but the average enterprise team is shipping 4 times a year or less. And that means, once your users are getting updates, 4 times a year or less. So a lot of people in recent years have come to recognize that that's just too slow. And a lot of people probably started hearing CI/CD, the importance of it, what it can mean for you and how it helps speed that up. So I'm going to dive into a little bit of exactly how it's going to help. So CI/CD basically helps to speed up feedback loops so you and your team can iterate quickly. And I'm talking about multiple kinds of feedback loops here. So the first one being like non-human feedback loops, right? Just every time a developer checks in code, having a build run, even if you plan to do nothing with it, is useful in that when it fails, you get immediate feedback from your CI machine that kind of points to a developer exactly where to look in the code. Now, in a traditional, just build it when I need it type model, you might go weeks committing before you actually try to build something that you need, and you're not going to get that feedback until that time, at which point you might have 40 commits to look through to try and figure out where it went wrong. The next feedback loop I'm talking about is a pretty common one, stakeholder feedback, where you need to share your app with your CEO or share it with your boss, marketing team, etc., so they can look at it, get approvals, and kind of continue on with the process. Speeding up getting it to them is going to speed up them approving it and thus shipping it. And of course, the last feedback loop is with your customers. So the faster you get updates out to your customers, the faster you're going to get feedback from them. We like to think of it as, faster releases just equal faster feedback from anywhere, and then faster iterations. It's all about, as people adopt agile practices, it's about speeding up your iterations, doing quick, fast iterations to improve the product. There's a quote I really like that says, if you're not shipping, you're not learning. Basically, if you're not getting new things out to your customer base, you're not learning from what they're seeing. So let's talk about what gets in the way of shipping. Here's a few common things I've seen in my experience. One is stakeholder approval. Especially with mobile apps, it just can be really hard to kind of get the different versions of your app out to them. Things get launched via the app stores, but iOS in particular has restrictions about side loading applications, and it can be hard just to get earlier versions of your app out to your stakeholders so that they can look at it, make sure everything's going okay, and approve it before you submit it for App Store approval. With a traditional app, it's a little easier to do, but iOS is hard. Multiple and unreliable build environments are another problem that kind of hang teams up, right? So I'm sure you've all experienced the works on my machine type scenario. Basically, especially with these hybrid mobile apps where you're building for Android and iOS, you're going to have Android Studio set up, you're going to have Xcode set up, the right versions, NPM, Node, all the versions of that, and then the signing certificates, everything. And if you're building on multiple developers' machines, it can be a real nightmare to figure out what's going wrong if something's not building or one of those little things is tweaked wrong on somebody's machine. And so if you're like me, you've probably spent days just helping one of your developers on your team to get up and running so that they can just build the application, which has nothing to do with them actually improving the app for the customer experience. It's just so that they can get it running on their machine. The other option people do is often they do have some sort of CI/CD that they maintain, and they run build servers in the cloud somewhere. But then one of your team members is going to be responsible for making sure they log into those machines, making sure they keep them up and running with the most updated versions of, you're going to have to run a Mac as well as probably a Linux machine for Android. You're going to want to keep them up to date with the most latest software updates, Node, NPM, all that stuff. And that can just be a time sink too, to have someone constantly maintaining that for you. And then the final thing that gets in the way of shipping is just the App Store approval process. Many, websites, web apps, backend apps are shipping applications. The ones who embrace CI/CD practices the most, they're shipping multiple times a day. And honestly, with the way the App Store approval process work, it's just not feasible for mobile apps to ship multiple times a day because sometimes it takes a couple of days to get approval on these things. And so we have some unique benefits with the fact that Ionic apps are built on the web, that we can actually use our live update service and the deploy service to sort of bypass the App Store. And you can actually now, with Ionic Deploy, ship releases multiple times a day, which is, can be really helpful. So let's talk about how Appflow helps. I talked about some of this already, but one, you get consistent, reliable build environments. We're managing those environments for you. You don't have to have your team waste time maintaining them. They can stay focused on the thing that matters, which is making your app better for your customer, improving your business. You don't have to worry about the doesn't work on my machine scenario because everyone's builds are building on the same machine. We trigger builds continuously if you use our automation features, which means, like I said, every time a developer's checking in new code, you can trigger a build and instantly get feedback when something's broken, so they don't have to spend hours and days debugging it weeks later when they do actually go to ship the app. And the next thing is for the stakeholder part of it. You can easily download and share these build artifacts. So when your IPAs and your APKs are all done, you can have your stakeholder log in, download them yourself, email to them, and distribute them that way. And it makes sharing these things pretty easy. And like I said just before, with our live update service and the unique way that Ionic's built on the web, you can just skip the App Store release process for most of your releases altogether. So I guess next what I'd like to do is just kind of go in and demo and help you see maybe what a recommended CI/CD pipeline might look like. And we generally suggest having a few separate environments we like to call development, staging, and production. I think that's a pretty common workflow for most people. And I'm going to kind of go in and show you how you can accomplish that with an Ionic 4 app and Ionic Appflow. So I'm just going to kind of start with a basic new application. And for lack of creativity, I'm going to call it new app. So basically, this is the Appflow dashboard. Once you create your new app, one of the first things I like to do is I just like to use the tools I'm already using. So I'm going to go ahead and just link this with GitHub automatically. I already have an app over there. That's the one I plan on using. Now I've already linked to GitHub. If you haven't yet, you could come in here and there'll be a connect to GitHub button where you could OAuth with GitHub, and then your repos for your account will become available. I have conveniently created this Ionic Team Appflow demo, so I'm going to link to that. And what I want to do next is I have my app linked, so I'm ready to work. Every time I push to that app, commits are going to show up in Appflow, and I'm going to be able to use them to package new builds, to deploy live updates if I need to. But before we get into that, I kind of want to walk through the basic setup I did of this application. So what we have here is, this is the initial commit. This is what's created from running the Ionic start command. Now I started with v4 app, and this is just the first basic commit. The next thing I did is I added the Cordova integration. You can run that using your Ionic command. It's Ionic integration enable Cordova. That's going to add Cordova to your project. You can commit the changes there and go on. The next thing I did was you need to add the deploy plugin, which is Cordova plugin Ionic, if you want to take advantage of our deploy service. So that's what I did next. And I'll kind of show you the easiest way to do that. So if you go into this deploy service, channels are what we use to distribute the updates so that each your app can listen to different channels. So you can have multiple versions of your app listening to separate channels so that they can receive separate types of updates. So I talked about having development, staging, and production environments. So I'm going to go ahead and create development right now. And I'm also going to go ahead and create staging. And for this part, I'm just going to start by working on our staging environment. But for the purposes of our app, I liked it to default to the development environment. So that's what I installed when I originally created the app. And the easiest way to see the command to install is there's this nice little setup deploy here. And basically you can just copy and paste this command right here. It basically has the variable of the app ID, so it knows where to check for updates, the channel it should be checking for updates from, and your update method. There's two main update methods: background, which will download any updates in the background while the user's using the app. Next time they open it, they will see it. And there's an auto method, which basically displays the splash screen for a little longer, and then the user sees the update immediately. So I went, for the purpose of the demo, with the auto method. And I already did this to my project. And when I ran that command, what you can see is that basically it did something pretty simple. It just added a couple values to my config.xml and my package.json, which set it up to be wired appropriately. The next thing I want to go through is just how we set up the project itself to build for multiple environments. So this is an Ionic 4 project. Between Ionic 4 and Ionic 3, the process is a little different. So Ionic 4 apps come with this Angular JSON file, and by default, it has a single environment, which is production. And it has this rule in here that says when I use a production configuration, I'm going to replace this default environment.ts file, which you can import throughout your app and use the things defined in that environment, with this environment.prod.ts. It also does some optimizations and gets rid of your source maps and all the things you'd want for your production level build. So all I did was add in two new environments. So the first one is the staging environment here, which is pretty much identical to our production because I want it to be basically as close to production as humanly possible, but it's going to listen to a different API and have a few different tweaks about it. So instead of using the production.ts environment file, I'm going to use the staging.ts environment file. And then I added this empty dev configuration, which just tells it it's going to use this main environment file, and it's not going to do any of the optimizations or any of those things, just for a development build for pure testing. And if we go down, I'm going to look first at these environment files that I defined. So here's the production.ts file. It's an environment. It has the name production, and it's just using the production API here to fetch data. The next one's the staging. Staging, again, just name staging, nothing unique here. Staging API is what it uses. And then our default one for development is just going to be named development and use localhost. So when I go back up here, we can actually see is the key here is that I modified the build script. So this is what Ionic Appflow runs when you push a deploy or a package build. It basically runs this build script to build your web assets. And what I did here was I just used this syntax, which tests for an environment variable in the environment called build-env. And if that environment variable exists, it's going to use it. Otherwise, it's going to default to dev, which is this default environment I configured before. And then I pass this -- configuration flag and use that environment variable, whatever it's set to just specify which configuration I'm going with up here. And then just to demonstrate for purposes, for ease of sight, I basically just made a little controller, assigned my API to the API, assigned the environment name to the environment, and here I'm displaying hello environment name and just printing out which API it's going to fetch data from so that we can see. So if I go over here, this is my app. I'm just going to go ahead and run Ionic Lab. That's a command that just allows you to run it locally. And so basically what we'll be able to see here is, once this gets built and up and running, we'll go over to our browser here. It's going to pop up the app. We're going to see the, if you're familiar with Ionic Lab, you can see the iOS version, you can see the Android version, kind of the little, minutia differences between the two side by side, which is pretty handy. But when it does finish compiling and it does finish loading, what you're going to end up seeing here is just the development environment, because that's what's configured to work locally when I'm not running with a specific configuration. So this always takes especially when my computer is running a little hot due to the webinar stuff, it's going to take a second. It looks like it compiled successfully, so it should load now. And while we're hello development with our 3 rockets, that's the current commit. So I'm going to close that out. And we're going to go ahead and head back to Appflow. And what I want to do is basically create a staging, a development, and a production environment for iOS applications, so that when I push, I start building IPAs. You can do the same thing for Android, but for today, I'm just going to set up the iOS side of things because it's a little trickier and there's a little more going on there, and I want to demonstrate that stuff. So what I'm going to start with is adding a certificate. So iOS has the idea of you need a signing certificate and a provisioning profile that specify, what you're going to use to sign the application so it can be loaded. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use an ad hoc signing certificate, which means it's a signing certificate that allows me to distribute the app, but it can only be installed on devices that are specified in the provisioning profile. So you have to specify each device exactly. I've already specified my device in the profile when I created it. And we do have documentation over here on how you can create this. I'll email the link out to this following the presentation, but we have pretty good documentation here. The key is that you're going to want to, I'm going to have created 3 distinct provisioning profiles for each environment, and each one will contain a separate bundle ID, which allows me to install the same app on the same, multiple versions of the same app on the same device, because you can't install 2 versions of the app if they have the same bundle ID. They have to be unique. So I made 3 provisioning profiles. They each had a unique bundle ID. And I basically followed these instructions and added my own device into the ad hoc signing cert. If you were using it with your stakeholders, you would add their devices in so that it can load on their phones. And then I personally like to use these. You can use Keychain to do some of this stuff, and you can look through these docs yourself. But I like to use these OpenSSL commands from the command line because I just think they're easier. And you can basically just copy and paste each of these commands and walk through these steps, and you'll end up with the correct profiles that you need to sign with. So I'm going to go ahead and add it. I have most of this stuff in here already. I said I was going to build a staging environment. Now, ad hoc builds are considered production type builds, so that's why I'm going to pick a production profile, even though it's called staging. And I'm going to go ahead, and here's where I have my provisioning profile. So I have 3. This one's the development, this one's the production, staging, and then this is my certificate, which I can use to sign all 3. So first I'm going to pick the certificate, which is the ad hoc certificate. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab a provisioning profile for staging, because that's the environment I said we were building. So that's this one. And then I'm just going to enter my password for the provisioning profile. So that, oops, I do that. I hit the wrong button there. I'm going to go add the cert again, pick the correct staging provisioning profile. And again, input the password so that the build will have access to the certificate. Save that. Won't put it in my password manager. And so now we have a staging certificate over here. Now the next thing I want to do is create this idea of a native configuration. So I talked about the bundle IDs being important so that you can install devices side by side. My goal here is going to be to decide to install each of my development environments and my production environment on my phone. And I'm going to do that here in this demo and show you side by side so that we can see the difference. So what that's going to take is I'm going to create a staging native configuration. And what this allows me to do is to override the bundle ID for that environment. So for staging, I'm going to be able to specify io.ionic.appflow. This is the bundle ID I put into the Apple provisioning profiles. That's staging, and that's my staging one. The other handy thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name of the app so that on my home screen when I'm looking, I can distinguish the 3 apps apart. So I'm just going to call this one Appflow Staging. So it's pretty easy to see. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to override the channel name so that the deploy plugin is listening to the staging channel for this particular environment. And I'm going to create that, and now I have a native configuration that's going to change those things on the fly for this environment for me. The next thing I want to do is go into my environments. If you can remember that build environment step you saw here, now I'm going to need to update this somehow through my builds. And the way I'm going to do that is with environment variables. So for my staging environment, I'm going to go ahead and add an environment variable called build end, exactly what we saw over there in the code. And I'm going to set it for staging to be staging. And that's going to tell it which API and which environment name to use. I'm going to create that. And now I have that available. And then the basically final thing I want to do is just create an automation so that every time I push to the staging branch, I'm going to automatically trigger an iOS build with those configurations. So I'm going to call this staging-iOS. I'm going to set it to listen to their staging branch. And I'm going to pick the package automation, pick my staging environment, my staging native configuration. I'm going to use Xcode 10. This was an ad hoc build. That's the certificate I made. And I'm going to use my staging security profile. And if I go ahead and create that automation, it'll pop up in here. And now anytime I push to this staging branch, this is going to go ahead and trigger a new package build. So I talked about wanting to create a development, staging, and a production environment. And at this point, just to save a little time, I went ahead and did all of this already in another application. So we're going to kind of pull one of those cooking show things. And basically, I'm going to go over the oven, and we'll pull out the finished baked muffins over here. So basically what I did over here is I've actually created several automations. And what I have here is the development for iOS. Now with this one, I did something a little special where I use this wildcard here to signify that anytime someone pushes a new branch to our GitHub that's feature hyphen anything, star will match anything, it's going to trigger a development iOS build. So this is really nice for when your developers are maybe checking out code off staging or maybe even having one extra environment and they're making their own feature branches. They can still trigger builds for each of their own personal branches, and then they can pull them down and look at them before they actually merge them into your staging environment. Here's the staging iOS environment that I created before, and I created basically identical to the staging one, a production one. And if you look, I have all the sort of building blocks. I have a staging, development, and production certificates, native configs, which specify the bundle ID slightly differently for each environment, and different deploy channels that they're listening to, and then different names for the application so I can tell them apart on the phone. And I have like the channels, which I showed you before. And the last thing is the environment so that the builds come out correctly. So a development build environment that specifies which configuration in that angular.json we're going to use. And so the next thing I want to do is that basically, if I look at each of these environments, we'll start with development for iOS. I just did some builds recently. So the latest build I have is this branch here. And I'm going to go ahead and download it, and we're going to install it on my device. So what I want to show is that essentially the same code we saw running in Ionic Lab, we're just going to get running on a real physical device for now. So I'm going to take my binary that I had built earlier, and I'm going to use this to install it here. And if you've not seen this before, this is just from Xcode, and this is my actual phone just hooked up through QuickTime, sharing it over the screen. So Xcode, if you put, I can close this out and quickly show you, but if you're in Xcode and you type window, devices and simulators, you can actually just see your phone device if it's plugged in via USB, and then you can use QuickTime to share to the screen. But this is my actual physical phone, and if I open the appflow-dev, which is what I just loaded from what I downloaded, we'll see over here that this says hello development, and it has the 3 rockets. And now what I can do is I'm going to go ahead and just close this out over here. And we'll go back and we'll load each of our other environments side by side as well. So we'll go into staging for iOS. We'll download the latest build for staging for iOS. And we'll load it on the device. And we can check out staging. And because of all those native configs environment variables, we can see this one says hello staging and uses the staging API versus the localhost API. And again, we can do it one more time with our production environment. So I go to automations, I look for production iOS, and I'm going to go ahead and download the latest one. Wait for it to finish, drag it over, install it on the device. And now I have Appflow, the production app, installed side by side. When I go to this one, it's going to say hello production in 3 rockets and hooked to our production API. And so now, using Appflow, I have each of my 3 environments installed side by side on my device, and I can easily test and see each one and see which one each one is. So, that's really powerful. And as developers continue to develop and check in code, these are just going to automate builds and continue on forward. But what I want to talk about next is so what if we decide that 3 rockets is just too many rockets for our application? We only meant to deploy 1 rocket, and 3 rockets is it's just too much. It's a bug. So we need to do a hotfix. So what I have created over here is also some deploy automations. And I created one that listens for the hotfix branch. And deploy is our live update service. And now I don't want to wait the 2 days to fix my application in production. I just want to fix it right away. So I set up to listen to any hotfix branch here, hotfix anything. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my code. I'm going to check out master because that's what production is. And I'm going to check out a new branch, which I'm going to call hotfix to fix the bug of too many rockets. Too much rocket. And I'm going to go into the app, and I'm going to take away some rockets. So we're just going to leave 1 rocket. That's what we wanted. I'm not using my aliases here. I'm going to do git status. I like to do git add -p because it kind of gives me a confirm to see sanity check. Yes, I wanted to go from 3 rockets to 1 rocket. That looks great. I'll do that, and I'll git commit -m, get rid of, we'll get rid of some rocket. And now what I do is I can just go ahead, and if I look, this is hooked up to GitHub. So I'm just going to git push the upstream origin and the hotfix too much rocket. So I push this up to GitHub, and I made that deploy rule. And so now what's going to happen is if I come back over here and I go into my hotfix for deploy, I should see the commit I just had, which is get rid of rocket. And so it's currently running. The build has already been automated. I can go in and check it out, make sure it's the correct build environment here, production, make sure it's the correct commit from the right branch. It looks like it is. The nice thing about this is that if you really did want to get something out fast or want to see it on a different device, these deploy builds, the web part, they build actually much faster than the iOS builds, just because of the nature of all the things that go into the build process. So this process, should finish in about a minute or less. And then we'll be able to deploy it to production and immediately go back to our binary that's already installed in the device. And we should see it update with 1 rocket instead of 3 rockets over there for the correct environment. Now, this doesn't just have to be for shipping hotfixes to production. You can also use the same functionality to distribute things to stakeholders easier, right? If you're having a hard time getting binaries in stakeholders' hands, you can just get the binary in their hands once. And as long as you're not having any native changes, you're adding new plugins or changing native functionality, then you can deploy new updates to them through the deploy service to the staging environments that we already have set up, and it'll be listening to the staging channel. And so you can just continue to make builds and ship updates that way to your stakeholders and get it in their hands much faster than having to ship them a new binary every time you want to do this. And you can also use it for development purposes. So if you just want to have your dev build locally installed on your device and just check via live updates, it's just a quicker, easier way of getting stuff out. And like I said, this kind of helps bypass the whole App Store process. So one thing I do want to mention is that I checked out this hotfix branch over here. I'm going to want to merge this back into production just for good practice. So I'm going to check out master again. And then I'm going to merge my hotfix branch just so that they stay up to date. And I'm going to go ahead and git push this back up to GitHub. Now what will happen here is this will actually trigger my production automation to build. I don't have to do anything. And when I go back to here, I can clearly see that this web build just deployed. So before we go look at what's going to happen with the other one, I'm going to go ahead and assign this to production just to get it out so that my end users have it. I'm going to deploy this to production. and that should be good to go. And we'll go back in a second and look on the device and make sure it's loaded properly. But we just pushed our production, and if you look, we already have a production iOS build running for us. So if I did want to then try to release this to the App Store so that also a binary was released and brand new users got the correct version right away, I could do that too. So it's kind of up to you how often you want to release binaries, if you want to continue to release them, but you can get the updates out faster without having to go through the App Store to do that. So now I want to go, and we just deployed that hot update to my device. So if we can go into the production version over here, we should see that I got rid of some rockets. And without having to reinstall a binary, we just basically shipped that update, which got rid of 2 of our rockets to the right production version of our app. And that's just a little demo of what the deploy service can do for you with live updates. So I think that's the scope of my demonstration for today. I'm going to go ahead and basically open the floor to some questions at this time. If you're interested in getting started with Appflow and learning more, we have documentations on our site, and you can contact sales at Ionic to get set up with anything you might need. So at this point, yeah, I'm gonna open the floor up to questions if anybody has any of those. So I do know there's a question about the ability to use Appflow with existing CIs, things like Jenkins, Circle CI, other things like that. So that is a possibility, and I just kind of want to dive into it quick. We have some documentation if you go to the package area, and I can send out a link for this afterwards too. But basically, we have the ability to trigger package builds from the CLI. You can, log in once you have a token, or if you're using a CI, you can grab a token that you need and set it as an environment variable in your CI process. And as long as the app is linked and everything, you can actually run trigger package build from the command line or from your CI process. So for example, on this one, I'm going to go ahead and do Ionic Package build. I'm going to do -- help because I can't always remember the commands. But we're going to specify the platform, which is iOS. I'm going to use the stuff I just had set up. There was an ad hoc build, and I'm going to use we'll go ahead, this is production, so I'm on master. So we'll go ahead and use the production settings for everything. We'll use the production security profile. We'll go ahead and use my production environment, as long as I make sure to spell it correctly. And we'll use the production native config as well. And you can add these as lines to one of your steps in your Circle CI or your GitLab CI or Jenkins or Travis or whatever it is you're using. And basically what's going to happen then is when it runs this step, you should see it's going to print out that it was created a build. It's just going to tail these logs, which are the same thing you might see in the dashboard. It's going to go through these whole build logs over here. And in fact, if we go back to the dashboard, you could actually refresh and there should be a second production build, although it's going to show as being triggered manually because it wasn't triggered through an automation. This is the build I just triggered. You can tell it has the build environment specified, the native config in here. But this is going to tail in your CI machine, and basically it's gonna if it fails or succeeds, either way, if it succeeds, it'll download the binary and you can continue on with your CI process. If it fails, you'll get like a negative return value, and your CI will error out to kind of notify you. So that's how you would go about using Appflow integrated with your CI. Another question that people have looks like the ability to access private Git repos for NPM dependencies. So we actually added this nice cookbook over here in our documentation, and we can send out a link for this too. But basically, there's a couple ways. We have the ability, I don't know if you saw when I was creating an environment over here, but we have the ability for secrets in our environments at this point. And secrets are nice in that they're encrypted. So they're stored in our database encrypted, so they're secure. Once you add them, you won't be able to see them and access them anymore. But basically what you can do is generate like a personal access token from GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever you want to use, and you can follow these docs here. And basically, you put the name, the username, the token, and the domain of the site which you're attempting to auth through, and you add a secret called get credentials with that value. And then anytime you're accessing repos in your package.json via this could be a private repository, and we'll go ahead and use those credentials from your environment when accessing any repos on bitbucket.org, or if you had ones on GitHub, and you could do it that way as well. Let's see, one other question that looks like people ask are about private NPM registries, which is another common one, so we put it in this cookbook as well. So for private NPM registries, you can actually create a read-only token from NPM, which will allow us access to your private registries. And then basically what you can do is, again, through one of those secrets, add your NPM token, and you can add a NPM RC file and commit that to your source code, and you can use the environment variable in your NPM RC. And basically this will allow us to access any private packages you might have on npm.js using the NPM token you specified in your secrets. So I think that's the most of the questions I have, it looks like, at this moment.
Actually, Nick, we've got a few more that just came in. One of the questions was how to connect Appflow to GitLab or local enterprise Gits.
Yes. So at the current moment, what we don't support GitLab. We do support private enterprise versions of in our scale package for Bitbucket and for GitLab, or sorry, not GitLab, GitHub. And basically, if you have the right plan, you'll see the options come up in there, and you'll be able to basically put in your server and the token to access the repositories and link it that way. It'll come up basically in this same area. I'll go back into my app over here. It'll come up if I disconnect from this app. You'd see Bitbucket, server, and other options up here. So for now, though, we just support GitHub and Bitbucket at the moment. And then the other option for people who are using something else is that you can push directly to us. So if you don't link to anything, you can actually add Ionic as a Git remote. And basically, anytime you're ready to do a build, you can just push directly. We'll give you basically a URL. You can link to the app. We'll run Ionic link, and we'll link it for you. And you can push your code directly to Ionic. The reason I like to use some of these other things is just that they're nice. They're nice tools, so I can go see the diffs and everything. And honestly, if you're using a Git remote, you're likely still going to want to use GitHub and other things because you're going to be able to see your code and make merge requests. And this is really, the Ionic Git remote is just for pushing code to it if we don't integrate with the thing you're already using.
Okay, cool, thanks. And so here's another question. In order to support different versions of the app, e.g. someone doesn't update the latest native immediately, I don't see that it's currently possible to assign iOS and Android min-max equivalent versions as part of this step.
I didn't show the native versioning portion, but was the question about, so if you go into one of these, commits here, basically, actually I think it's for the deploy thing. Yeah, actually I got to go back to the app. It's for the deploy service. If you needed to, say you made a plugin update and you needed, like you add the camera plugin and you start calling your JavaScript code, you're not going to be able to ship a live update with that because you need to update the native binary so that the camera access is already there. So basically what you're going to want to do at that point is release a new binary, but you're going to want to make sure that any of your old channels don't get the new version. So what you can do then is, you go into one of these deploy builds and you can basically specify here in the versioning area for iOS and Android what the minimum, maximum, and equivalent versions that these should be deployed to. So, say you added the camera functionality to this commit and it's only available in version 2.0.0 or greater, you could just specify that this should only ship out to the binary versions that have 2.0.0 or greater, and you can specify different versions for Android depending on how you version your iOS and Android.
All right. Another question, can we manage different app versions with this?
Through the so I guess I'm not 100% clear on the question. There's a couple things you can do. So if you're looking for like a white label version of your app, there is some customers who do that. So by setting certain build environment variables, they can basically take an app that's, just kind of a shell app and then customize the CSS, the themes, some of the content even through these build processes and have it build into multiple versions of the same app. If you're looking to kind of manage it through multiple versions, I would suggest like the same app, but multiple, I guess, different apps. You could create just a separate app with a separate app ID in here, and that would probably help accomplish that. But you absolutely can do white labeled versions of apps by setting up multiple automations and using the environment system to sort of customize the different versions of that app.
Okay, next question is, how about backward compatibility? How often will we have to update Ionic Pro plugin, et cetera, to ensure that CI still works?
So the Cordova plugin should work as long as you're using version 5 of the deploy plugin. The site's going to stay up to date, so the native configs, I think, might be what you're referring to, but this is for version 5, and we're going to keep this up to date with that, so you shouldn't have to worry about backwards compatibility there issues. If we were to release a version 6 or some breaking changes, we'd implement ways in this in which you could basically specify the version you were using. So new ones, we would help you maintain backwards compatibility. But at this point, this is compatible with version 5 of the deploy plugin, and we don't foresee us adding a version 6 anytime soon. So compatibility should stay for quite a while.
Okay, next question. Can you add remove plugins through Ionic Package?
So you can't add or remove plugins. In fact, the way Ionic Package works is basically, if we go back to GitHub over here, it basically just looks at this this config.xml, and it uses this and the versions specified in here to understand exactly what versions of the plugin you installed. So you're going to want to make sure that whatever's specified in your config.xml and package.json are actually what you want to use. There's no way right now, it's best to manage this stuff via your code base. So basically, Ionic Appflow just listens directly for your config.xml and package.json as the source of truth, and we don't have the ability right now for you to add anything. You can simply sort of override the settings for, in particular, our Ionic deploy plugin. All right, so I think it sounds like that's about all the questions I have. So I think unless there's any more, we can go ahead and wrap this up. But I appreciate everyone taking the time to come here and check out this demo. I hope you found it useful. And again, if you have interest in getting started with Appflow, feel free to reach out, contact sales at Ionic. We'd love to help get you onboarded, get you training if you need it, whatever you might need to help your business take advantage of this really powerful tool.
Okay, I just stopped the recording.